House tax will be called to order. First item would be requests for bill introductions. Do we have any requests? Seeing none, we will move right on to our first hearing of the day, and that is Senate Bill 51. I will turn to the reviser for an overview on that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 51 would grant a qualified firm that makes an investment in a qualified data center of at least $250 million and creates and maintains at least 20 new jobs at the qualified data center within 2 calendar years after the commencement of operations. They would receive a sales tax exemption. This would be for the construction or remodeling of a qualified data center, the purchase of data center equipment, eligible data center costs, and certain labor costs. Admittedly, this bill does have quite a few details involved with it. I'm going to try and go through the overview at a more of a broad level, but there are some administrative details in the bill, more than what I'll just go over here. A qualified firm seeking a sales tax exemption would be required to submit an application to the Secretary of Commerce and enter into agreement with the Secretary within such terms and conditions as the Secretary would require, including the commitments or conditions required by the Secretary. This agreement would be entered into before any sales tax exemption would be allowed. If it is determined by the Secretary that the qualified firm has breached a term or condition of the agreement, the Secretary shall provide written notice to the qualified firm as to which conditions or terms were breached and allow for the qualified firm to cure within 120 days. If the breach terms or conditions are not cured within such time, the Secretary may require the qualified firm to repay all or part of the amount of the sales tax exemption. They may terminate the sales tax exemption or suspend all or part of the sales tax exemption until the breach is cured. As a condition of receiving the sales tax exemption, a qualified firm is required to complete or cooperate with audits by the Department of Revenue and provide the Secretary of Commerce information required for the publication in the Economic Development Incentive Program Information Database. Every 5 years, the Secretary of Commerce may conduct a review of the activities undertaken by a qualified firm to ensure that the qualified firm remains in good standing with the state, is in compliance with the provisions of this act, and within respect to any agreement entered into pursuant to this bill, and that the qualified firm continues to meet the requirements for the sales tax exemption provided under the bill. The Secretary of Commerce shall certify every 5 years to the Secretary of Revenue whether the qualified firm meets the criteria for designation as a qualified firm and is eligible for such sales tax exemption. Under the sales tax exemption, this would be the amounts or the duration for how long it would last. It would be for 15 years after the date of commencement of operations for qualified firms making an investment of at least $250 million in a qualified data center, for 30 years for a qualified firm making an investment of at least $500 million, and then for 60 years for a qualified firm making an investment of at least $1 billion. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Committee questions? Representative Sawyer. Clayton.
I respond to both. Thank you, Adam. So my question is this: because I'm looking at this, and wouldn't data centers qualify for any other eco-devo projects or benefits? You know, like would they qualify for HPIP, for instance, or is this due to the lack of employees that they have? Just could you help clarify that for me, please?
Without knowing all the details of HPIP, you're right. There are certain caveats for HPIP requiring wages and things like that. I'd have to look into more details of whether or not they would actually qualify, or someone from Commerce would probably be better to answer that. But I'm probably not prepared to answer that right now.
Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What is the definition of a qualified data center?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Qualified data center is a defined term. It means one or more buildings that are constructed, reconstructed, enlarged, or remodeled to house a group of network computer servers in the state to centralize the storage, management, and dissemination of data and information pertaining to a particular business, taxonomy, or body of knowledge, and such buildings are connected to each other by fiber and associated equipment required for operating a fiber transmission network between data center buildings and internet points for the purpose of providing redundancy and resiliency for the data center services provided in each building.
Okay, and, this may be for the proponents, but can you give me an example of a qualified data center?
Admittedly, I'll probably have to defer to a proponent to describe what these are.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Committee, any further questions? Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Say, on the 20 jobs, is there anything that says what level of pay those jobs would be?
Mr. Chairman, I don't recall seeing that in this bill. I wasn't the actual original drafter of it. I'll keep looking, but I'm not, I don't believe that that was a provision, but if I find anything, I'll let you know.
All right, thank you.
Adam, I just had one question as well. In section 3, where it talks about the 15, the 30, the 60 years, and then the sales tax exemption status, I'm trying to find, I'm not sure if it's up in section 2. In section 3, D on that page, says the sales tax exemption shall be revoked, suspended, or modified by the Secretary of Revenue as requested by the Secretary of Commerce upon notification. Oh, that's probably at 2C. Because I was trying to find out, is that an annual? Let me go back up to that section and see if I can find that. I didn't know if that was annually they looked at this, or every 5 years, every 10 years. I didn't know how long they looked back to make sure that the provisions of the bill had been met.
I know there's certain, 5 years they do reviews. So I know there's like a thorough review every 5 years. However, if they are, I guess if they're found to be in non-compliance, that's what would trigger subsection 3D.
Okay, because I was looking at, I think section 2, subsection E1 said something about every 5 years, the secretary may conduct a review, but I didn't know if there was anywhere in here that it said they shall. I mean, I wanted to make sure that there was, and perhaps the proponents could speak to that as well. They might know this a lot better than I do.
A lot of this is baked into these agreements that they have to enter into. A lot of the terms are, to my understanding, are left not intentionally vague, but these agreements hold a lot of weight between the Secretary of Commerce and these entities. A lot of the details aren't necessarily filled out in statute.
Okay, that makes sense too. Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just skimming through the bill. Would this be a sales tax exemption for local government also by us doing it this way?
Yes, it would.
And then I didn't see an increase in the employment requirements for the larger investment amounts. In other words, when it goes, I don't remember how many years it was, for a $500 million one or $1 billion one, there wasn't any requirement to increase the number of employees, is there?
No, that requirement, I believe, applies for all classes, regardless of the amount.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, committee, any further questions for the reviser? Seeing none, thank you, Adam. We'll also welcome Department of Revenue, if they're here. Yep, there you are, Kathleen, to address the fiscal note.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. We are estimating that Senate Bill 51 does have the potential to decrease state and local sales tax revenues by unknown amounts, as we don't know the number of projects that will actually qualify. Once we know that, we can give you a better estimate.
All right, thank you, Kathleen. Committee, any questions? Representative Helgerson.
But isn't it also that if that exemption's not there, they may not build? So it's projected, the way, same way we do some of the local enhancements. If they have to have the sales tax exemption in order to build or bring it to Kansas, then we wouldn't have anything, or we give them a lower cost on the building. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure that I understand. I mean, if they were to come in and renovate a building, then they would get a project exemption certificate.
Or they go to another state?
That's exactly right. Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, seeing no further questions, thank you, Kathleen. We'll now turn to our proponent testimony and welcome first to committee, Brad Smoot. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Brad Smoot. I'm appearing today on behalf of NetChoice. It's a national association of the companies that are best known for internet and internet services of all types, including Amazon, Meta, Apple, X, Google, et cetera. I have with me today a couple members of our team. One is Justin Hill, that many of you may have met. He describes himself as a recovering Missouri member of the House of Representatives. I don't know whether he's recovering from Missouri or being a legislator, but one of the two. And Larry Ann Brown, my better half, who reminds me regularly why we need data centers with her 38,000 unopened texts, emails, and photographs. So we know that something needs to be stored somewhere, and that's what this whole discussion is really all about. I very much appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. We have an excellent list of conferees behind me, and I want to make sure I don't step on their terrific comments. Also, we've already had some great questions that I'm just itching to answer. But first, let me just talk a little bit about what data centers are. In part, Representative Sanders asked, can you describe one? Well, I can't in Kansas because we don't have any that would qualify under this statute. We do have data centers here, but they're all very small by comparison. I think one in Nebraska or Iowa was described as 5 million square feet. These are multi-billion-dollar projects, and they have servers in them, and they collect data and store the data that we all use every day for search engines, cloud computing, AI, just everything you can think of. Data centers are the infrastructure or backbone of our internet system that we all rely on. We're using it right now to conduct our internet connectivity with everybody around the state that's watching this hearing and others. The data centers are proposing to come to Kansas and build multi-million-dollar facilities in urban and rural areas as well, and invest billions of dollars of private money. And the only thing this bill asks for is to get a sales tax exemption on their machinery and equipment and their construction like we already do. We have more than 100 different sales tax exemptions out there. We've got them for grain elevator, machinery and equipment and repairs. We've got them for various manufacturing situations. We have them for distribution centers. This is just distribution of data rather than distribution of widgets that we're talking about. I think one of the other questions Representative Helgerson asked was really pertinent as well. This is one of those situations in which if they don't come, you don't lose anything. If they do come, you have the opportunity for jobs, income tax, property tax, sales taxes of all different types, and I'm going to try to talk some about where those elements are in the bill. Only the states that have an exemption such as this will get data centers in the future. There are over 30 that have a sales tax exemption of some kind that applies to data centers. Almost all of those that do have a specific one for data centers, the exemption is unlimited. That's not the case in this bill. Very few, if any, of the other states have a threshold of investment that's required in order to qualify for this exemption. This bill has that. We're not trying to bring in smaller projects. We're doing our best to incentivize the large companies to invest in Kansas and Kansas workers and Kansas property owners and the state tax revenues. Excuse me for a second, and I'll get right back with you. Let me talk, if I could, just very briefly about the threshold idea. The minimum amount you can invest here is $250,000 in order to qualify. You got to have at least 20 jobs. That won't be hard for these data centers should they come to Kansas. The average data center steady employment is 180 to 200 employees, and it depends in large measure on how big the operations become. We structured the bill in such a way as to incentivize the larger investors. So if you only want to get a 15-year exemption, you may only invest $250,000. As the Department of Commerce noted, this tiering of the structure of the length of the term of the exemption and the amount of investment is very reasonable because it's coordinated. If you invest a lot of money, you're going to expect an exemption for some number of years so that you can regain the costs of your investment. That's why we have 30 years as the recommended amount for those who invest $500 million. For those who invest $1 billion or more, we recommended 60 years. As I indicated to you, in many of the states that have an exemption such as this, there is no limit. Most of our exemptions for this in the statute that this amends, there is no limitation. Not all of them, but most of them, there's no limitation on the length of term for the exemption that's involved. One special provision of this bill that is different from the others, and many of you who've served here a while may remember this. This bill's been around here a couple of years. Passed the House Commerce Committee a couple of years ago, passed the Senate Commerce Committee last year, passed the Kansas Senate this year on a vote of 34-6, and comes to this committee for your attention and approval and modifications if necessary. The principal difference, though, in addition to the threshold and the time period, the original bills were unlimited exemptions. This one has the exemptions I discussed and the threshold I discussed. That other provision, though, is the taxation of electricity. And this is particularly important. Many folks have been concerned that locals get a lot out of this. They get the jobs, they get the huge property tax benefit should a data center be located in their community. What they don't get, what the state doesn't get, is a lot of revenue directly from sales taxes because you're granting an exemption on machinery and equipment and so forth. So this bill proposes to go ahead and continue to tax the electricity used in data centers. Well, as you all know or could imagine, data centers are big users of electricity. That's one of the reasons you have testimony here from Evergy in your written packet, and I would commend their testimony as well as Commerce and many of the other people that have written only testimony. I've had a chance to read through much of that, and it's excellent. It's well thought out. I think you'll find it very useful. They have adequate energy available for us. They're planning on growing the energy capabilities of Kansas. They indicate that stable usage, like a data center would use, which is 24/7, is the kind of thing that helps lower costs for all ratepayers. But it also produces a lot of tax on electricity. Attached to my testimony, you'll find a chart that has a bar graph on it. And basically what it attempts to show you is that over the years, as the Department of Revenue estimated, we would see on a $250 million project a claimed exemption of an estimated amount. I think it was about $2.5 million a year or something like that, depending on however, or $9 million, something like that. I can't remember. What's important, though, is that when you look at the chart, what you find out is over time, the amount of money that the data center will pay to the state of Kansas will actually exceed the amount of the sales tax exemption. And that's not to mention the income tax you'll get from the companies, the income tax you'll get from all the surrounding businesses, the income tax you'll get from the workers, all the sales tax you'll get from their expenditures in the community and so forth. So I think you'll find that much of the concern that we've heard around that the general fund is not getting much went away with the changes that are included in Senate Bill 51. Likewise, I think a lot of the things you heard about, the concerns about is there going to be enough power, are probably taken care of or at least responded to by the Evergy comments. I have listed on the second page, and I'll wrap up here as quickly as I can, and won't read through much of this, but I've listed several of the states and the various analysis that have been done of those. If you look at the map in the net choice materials that have been submitted, on page 7 is a map of the United States showing the 31 states that already have a sales tax exemption for data centers. Many of those are right around us: Nebraska, Missouri, Iowa, Ohio, Oklahoma, Texas. Everybody else is in this game. And if you have an opportunity to read the Commerce Department, what you'll find out is there were about 14 proposals or projects to build data centers in possibly Kansas or elsewhere that slipped away last year, or that were in the queue. 5 of them slipped away last year because we didn't have this exemption in place. We weren't even really a candidate for that. Because as I say, when I put it in the vernacular, ain't nobody coming here until this legislation gets passed. They're still going to have the same kinds of normal business decisions that we all would make if we were in charge. They're going to have to make sure there's enough employment base, that there's enough affordable land, that there are qualified workers and so forth, that all the things that business normally wants. But the sales tax exemption is key to incentivizing, and all these other states have figured that out. And we think it's time that Kansas got busy and got an opportunity to get business out of this. I'll finish with 1 or 2 quick thoughts. This is the only incentive that's in this bill. All these other, I think there was a question about what other tax breaks or benefits might be available here. This bill doesn't change any of that. Whatever it is, it is. Whatever the standards are to get those are there. What decisions the locals make about what to offer is still there. You can change that if you want to, but that's not what this bill does. This bill just adds the sales tax exemption to the mix of incentives that you have to bring in business to the state of Kansas. The data center industry, the high-tech industry, is the highest investment category, capital investment category out there. It's higher than aviation. It's higher than many of the other, even the energy sector. This is where the money is going, and if you want that money to come to Kansas as an investment, this is one of the ways you do to incentivize it. One last thing. There's a halo effect around data centers. They tend to draw other types of high-tech industries who want to be close. They call it low latency. I'm not sure I even know what that means. I'm the guy who can't cut and paste a message from text to email, but low latency seems to be a factor that inspires insurance companies who collect enormous amounts of data to keep it and store it close by and to build many of their facilities and activities close to data centers. Likewise with health insurance and health data collected by hospitals and various government programs that keep track of health data. The military likes to be close to data centers. So I think that there are lots of opportunities for other types of business to surround this. And I'll finish with one last thought. Oftentimes, various types of investments and businesses are attracted to urban areas, and they may be, in the case of data centers as well, be attracted to the Kansas City area or the Wichita area. One of the unique things about data centers is because they're so big, the price of land is a huge issue. Connectivity is a big issue. Well, the connections run down our interstate systems. So that makes anything along the interstate a potential location for a data center. Because they don't generate a lot of long-term jobs necessarily by comparison to certain other types of businesses, they can be in a moderately sized community. In Oklahoma, just one county south of Kansas, we have a $5 billion Google plant with thousands of employees. And it's in a county of 50,000 people. So there's opportunity here for large parts of Kansas. While I was testifying last year in front of the Senate Commerce Committee, the Missouri governor announced that they had just landed an $800 million data center at the Port Authority in North Kansas City, right across the river from Atchison and Leavenworth, and some of our other communities would dearly love to have those jobs and that investment there. So I think, and by the way, Evergy serves that facility over in Missouri. It could be serving it here in Kansas had we had this in place. With that, Mr. Chairman, there are a lot of other conferees who can add a great deal to this, and I'll be happy to stand around and respond when I get a chance.
Thank you for your testimony, Brad. Our next conferee would be Bob Johnson, and committee, while you're coming up to the podium, we'll go ahead and take questions at the end since we have several conferees for each section. So welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and representatives of the committee here. I very much appreciate your time and you having me here today. Bob Johnson with the Polsinelli Law Firm, appearing here today on behalf of Sunflower Redevelopment, LLC, the owner and operator of the Astra Enterprise Park, formerly known as the Sunflower Army Ammunition Plant, now incorporated into DeSoto, Kansas. So I speak from the perspective of Sunflower Redevelopment and as a representative of developers day in, day out in this region, and in particular in this state of Kansas. I've been doing this for many years, close to 15 now, and have seen all sorts of cycles and waves of development in the state of Kansas. But I'll say, I was recently at a beginning of the new year conference, and it was universal that there is one asset class within the last 2 years that has pointed upward, and that's data centers. When you're looking at what development is going to come to this state, if we approve this, it is data centers. If we look at what development we're missing out on, it is more than significant if we don't pass this, because this is what developers, the investors, the debt community is looking at investing in the country and in the region for all the reasons that Brad spoke to. And I think we need to capture that here in Kansas. I'm a Kansan. I want to see this for our community, our state. It will be a boon to our economic development in this state. And it's something that, speaking from the perspective of Sunflower Redevelopment, I can tell you is a make or break proposition that is certainly very live right now. I obviously cannot speak to specific details, but we hear of two things. We hear of power. Obviously, that's been discussed. Is there going to be enough power? And that is something that is being addressed by Evergy and their large load rate case. Not to my expertise to speak to. That is their bailiwick. The other thing we hear about is, do you have a sales tax exemption? Deals will not come here of this scale unless we have this sales tax exemption. It's as simple as that. And it's something that every hyperscaler is very well aware of. They're very well aware that our competitor states have this sales tax exemption in place. Once Missouri passed theirs, they got the Google and Meta centers. Once Iowa's was in place, they got the Meta, Apple, Google centers near Des Moines. This is essential for data centers to locate in our state. Brad, I won't try to go over all of his testimony. I thought it was very thorough. My written testimony speaks to many of the same points. I'll try to be additive here. The reason, obviously, that this is so critical for data centers is that they have to replace their equipment so often. And just like our manufacturers in the state, which should be incentivized to come here and build here, and long have been, data centers don't have that same opportunity. We need to give them that opportunity so that they can be competitive. They can invest in new technology when their servers wear out, when the technology gets replaced, when the cooling technology develops, which is rapidly advancing. They have the opportunity to make those hundreds of millions of dollars of investment after they build the initial facility, with the ability to do that at a degree that pencils, that actually makes economic sense for them to come here. So when I hear that from the data center owners and operators as they're looking at our state, I don't take it as lip service. I take it as a matter of fact that that's essential to them to be able to create a deal that will work in this state moving forward. The reason beyond just getting that initial $2 billion investment in our state, which is significant in and of itself, is what Brad touched on there towards the end. And this is something we're seeing day in, day out at Astra as well. It's beyond the data centers. The data centers are the brain. The data centers are the nervous system of the other types of manufacturers, advanced manufacturing, research and development, hospitals, technology companies we want in this state. It's exactly the type of the future economy that we need to attract to this state. They will not come unless they have their brain located nearby. It's latency, as Brad referenced. You can't put a data center in Pittsburgh whose data is coming back to advanced manufacturer in anywhere in the state of Kansas. It's not going to work for them. The data needs to be there much sooner. It needs to be also secure. That's the other issue, is security. They need to be able to monitor and be close to their data center operations so that they know day to day how that's working and that it can be run in the same location. Really, the way that this is advancing so quickly, it's to be said that it's critical infrastructure. It's like a road. It's like having utilities for these advanced manufacturers, research and development firms. They need this as much as they need those traditional infrastructure pieces. And so again, unless we have all of the pieces of the infrastructure puzzle for these companies, we won't get that spillover development as well. And again, I see this day in, day out at Astra, at other developments in the state, that this is a live situation where we're going to be able to, once we get these data centers, get a whole heck of a lot more as well that'll bring sales tax, bring property tax, bring other benefits to the state and our local communities. I want to hit on the fact that this is a very narrowly targeted incentive. We're speaking to sales tax, to Representative, your question. If we do not attract these companies, we're not giving up anything. This is only if these data centers come to our state that we're actually giving up anything. It is narrowly targeted only to the sales tax. Any other property tax abatements, what have you, that is in the purview of a local jurisdiction. They can decide not to give that. They can decide to give a portion of property tax. That's not the consideration of this bill. It is only sales tax. And thus, just like manufacturers and the other 100 on the list that have sales tax exemptions that get those incentives day in, day out in this state, as well they should, because they were put in place for good reasons at the time they were put in place. This is, if you will, the low-hanging fruit that gets us what we want in the way of all of those other spillover benefits, economic and otherwise. I don't need to speak more about our competitor states. Again, we're in a position now, this room was much smaller last year at the Senate Commerce Committee. There's a lot more interest in it now, and for good reason. It's what I said at the outset, and that's that this is where the investment is located now in the world of commercial real estate, in the world of technology. The time is now. This is the third year that a similar bill has been in front of the legislature. We have got to capture this moment in the state of Kansas so that we don't miss out on what's coming. The $500 billion investment in the United States announced by Apple very recently, that's coming. And it's not coming 5 years from now. We have got to get this done in the state so we do not miss out on those investments that can be made in our communities. And beyond that, I don't want that advanced manufacturer in Tulsa. I want it in the state of Kansas. I think we all have the same aligned interests here, and hope we can get this passed so that we can attract that investment to our state. I think my other points were covered by Mr. Smoot, so I'll stand for any questions and happy to return later if there are any questions for me as well.
Okay. Thank you. We'll take questions at the end, so thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Our next conferee would be Laura Lowe. Welcome to committee.
Well, thanks, Chairman Smith and members of the House Committee on Taxation. My name is Kara Lowe. I'm President and CEO of KC Tech Council. I am also a native Kansan from Overland Park. I'm joined today by my teammate, Christine Murray. I should say Hutchinson's own Christine Murray. We are a Jayhawk and Wildcat somehow working together to grow the tech economy in Kansas. The KC Tech Council is a membership organization, and we work with more than 200 companies, institutes of education, and other organizations who share an interest in growing the tech economy in the Kansas City region. And for us, that means the tech economy is in both Kansas and Missouri. So we're really proud to be in support of this legislation, and I'll offer a few pieces of why this matters to us specifically as a member-based organization that advocates for the growth of the tech economy. We, as a organization, are committed to advancing innovation, creating and expanding high-quality tech jobs in the region, and driving economic growth. Our membership includes the very large tech employers that you may know in our region, like Garmin. We also host a number of mid-sized small enterprise businesses in Kansas City within our membership. We're different, but we all share the same focus of driving the tech economy to create prosperity for our states. We know also that infrastructure is at the core of the tech industry. It is determinate upon where companies continue to grow and invest. And with the advent of AI and the extraordinary exponential growth that innovation in computing has created, we also know that this is an economic development opportunity that is essentially rolling downhill toward us. And we have a really great opportunity to capture it in the state of Kansas. We know there are several studies around the kind of exponential shift in development around data centers. One that I think is pretty profound that I've read is a McKinsey study that said that from this year in 2025 to the end of this decade, there will be as many data center developments as there have been since the turn of the millennium up to this point. So it is a significant increase in what companies are looking to invest globally, and we would love to see some of that investment generate locally within the state of Kansas. We run programming for hundreds of folks who work within this subsector and in the data center and tech infrastructure subsector. And we also study a lot of economic data. The KC Tech Council really prides itself on, we follow tech workers. We want to know where those tech jobs are, and we want to make sure that we're supporting the companies that hire those workers. We also track some economic data in both of our states due to our kind of regional focus. And we know that with the data that we've tracked within the telecom, cloud infrastructure, data processing, and hosting subsectors of the tech industry, Kansas actually experienced a 3% reduction in jobs year over year within that subsector. And during the same time frame, Missouri experienced a 10% increase in jobs. Those jobs represent about a third of tech jobs in the state of Missouri. So it's really important, we believe, that this is a growing subsector, the infrastructure and data center subsector of the tech industry. I heard earlier, and I just looked this up, we measure a lot of salary data is there a requirement on how much salary is actually created. It's important to note that the average tech salary is twice that of the average salary in the state of Kansas. And within data centers, the average salary from a data technician to an operations manager runs anywhere from about $56,000 to $155,000. So these are well-paying jobs as well. I'll leave you with a couple notes. We do coordinate a lot with companies that are doing good work in this space. In fact, in Kansas City and throughout the state of Kansas, we're home to some of the best-in-class developers of data center projects. They are going to Loudoun County, Virginia, or to other regions across the country and globe to build these types of projects. These are the folks who want to build in here. They're already headquartered in Kansas City. They're working here to develop these projects, and they would love to be doing more of their work in their own backyard. So we know the digital economy is Kansas's opportunity to lead and innovate and thrive. That's why we are here in support of Senate Bill 51. Welcome an opportunity to discuss when questions are levied to the group, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, I'd like to welcome Chad Tenpenny. Welcome to committee.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Chad Tenpenny with Tenpenny Law. Today I'm here representing Geiger Ready Mix, where I serve as the general counsel. I'm here to speak as a proponent of Senate Bill 51. Geiger Ready Mix is a 133-year-old company. Family-owned and operated business. It employs over 250 team members. Geiger operates 7 ready-mix concrete batch plants in the Kansas City area. Includes locations in Leavenworth, where we have our roots, Kansas City, where we have our headquarters, Olathe, and DeSoto, where we have a mobile plant located on the Astra Enterprise Park site that was just mentioned. Mr. Chairman, we take sand, rock, gravel, powder, cement, scientifically mix it with water, and we make concrete. Then we deliver it in big red and white trucks all over the Kansas City metro area. Our company motto is on time and hustle. In addition to residential construction on city street upgrades, Geiger has delivered concrete to US 69 upgrades, to warehouses in Olathe, and data centers in Kansas City, Missouri. We're hopeful to have the same opportunity in Kansas. First, we want to say thank you. Geiger Ready Mix is supplying all the concrete to the Panasonic building in DeSoto. We've also helped deliver to projects in the area that are a result of that economic development. And the 15 Geiger Ready Mix employees at that site want to say thank you for your past efforts of economic development. Today, we support Senate Bill 51. We understand the legislature has many economic development tools at their disposal, but we support the effort to equalize the sales tax exemption law, leveling the playing field with the numerous other states that you've heard about. We're hopeful that passage of this bill and the leveling of the playing field will create significant opportunities, not only for concrete companies, but lots of others in the in the construction industry in Kansas. Mr. Chairman, I want to underscore that Geiger Ready Mix not only has data center experience, but we're hiring. And we're looking for folks who don't mind getting up early in the morning and are eager to build the Kansas economy. Our Ready Mix drivers can earn $80,000 their first year with the company. Experienced drivers can earn $100,000 plus benefits. Finally, Geiger Ready Mix is a member of the powerful and influential DeSoto Economic Development Council, and they've submitted written testimony, and encourage you to review that as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Brad Harden, and I believe he is joining us via WebEx. Brad, are you there?
I'm here.
Yes, we've got you loud and clear. Please continue.
Excellent. Well, good afternoon, Chairman Smith and members of the House Taxation Committee. I'm excited to be with you all virtually today. My name is Brad Harden. I'm the president of Diode Ventures. We're a global data center developer headquartered here in Overland Park, Kansas. We're a subsidiary of Overland Park-based Black & Veatch. which is one of the largest employers in the state of Kansas. And so thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify today in favor of Senate Bill 51 and the significant benefits we believe bringing data center infrastructure to the state of Kansas can bring. So at Diode, we work with some of the world's largest technology companies to ensure their customers have reliable, efficient, and 24/7 access to data. And as the world's digital footprint continues to expand, access to modern data centers is only going to continue to increase. And we believe Kansas would benefit from being in the discussion and in the room to reap the upside that these facilities deliver. We also know that data centers are not all created equal, and proceeding with the right set of objectives for a project to be met and the community to be satisfied is really critical to making a successful project. Market opportunities like this, I know it's been said before, timing matters. And we believe that with the right set of incentives, best projects are going to move forward in Kansas with skilled data center partners and developers alike. Approving tax incentives for data centers is going to help Kansas communities unlock substantial benefits to public infrastructure and essential services, oftentimes in the communities that are struggling the most to meet the ever-increasing needs for critical human infrastructure. And growing up in a small farm town on the Kansas City, Missouri side, I know firsthand what the impact of millions of dollars in the community could bring to schools, libraries, and other public facilities. Data center developments regularly contribute to community improvements in water, wastewater, and transportation infrastructure, and really just infrastructure at large, in making them more resilient and more scalable. Additional infrastructure really not only supports the data center project, but also the ongoing demands for communities, whether that be through population growth or industrial growth and manufacturing growth. So when you think about the downward pressure on the overall tax rate coupled with the increased job opportunities, data centers really benefit local businesses in the community and in the state. And we've seen that. So our recently developed 900-acre data center campus in Missouri, now operated by Meta, I think that's been mentioned a couple times, and we're proud of that. It really will provide a significant source of funding for the Smithville School District. And in fact, contributions from the first year for that project in part have allowed the Smithville School District to increase staff salaries 7.5%, the largest amount that has ever been added in a single year. And when we really think about those continued investments that reach into the millions of dollars, I think we collectively can imagine what those millions of dollars of found revenue can do for school children across the state of Kansas and for communities at large. We've been in the data center development space for almost a decade, and we definitely have a pulse on the areas of the country that are of most interest to these global technology operators and providers and organizations. And I can tell you for certain there are a number of sites throughout the state of Kansas that would be of significant interest, and the ability, and as a Kansan, the access to large and diverse energy sources, abundant land in the center of the country make our state a desirable destination for these developments. And right now, however, as it's been said, Kansas really doesn't we're not in a position to compete with some of these neighboring states who have already improved incentive packages. And approving Senate Bill 51 would be a huge step in the right direction and really significantly increase our state's chances of reaping these economic benefits. So in closing, I would like to offer that the technology world is moving at a rapid pace. We believe it's time that Kansas continues to grow and take advantage of these significant benefits we've mentioned, and what the value these projects can bring to communities. We've had the privilege of working around the world to bring critical technology infrastructure where it is needed most, and having seen transform school programs, improve roads, public safety, and enrich communities overall, it would bring us a lot of joy to bring these benefits to our own backyard, along with our fellow citizens here in Kansas. So, and really want to throw in our support behind Senate Bill 51. We believe we got the opportunity to leave a legacy, and what we're seeing is a really first of a generational opportunity for economic growth in our communities. So thank you for your consideration, and I'll be available for questions if needed.
All right, Brad, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to welcome Kimberly Swati. Welcome to committee.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to be here before you this afternoon on behalf of the Advanced Power Alliance. And I just have to say, no, this is not the Utilities Committee, but we are going to talk a lot about power generation here for just a good second. So bear with me. On behalf of the Advanced Power Alliance, we are here in support of Senate Bill 51 today. And as we've talked about before, the Advanced Power Alliance and our member companies, they are the owners and operators and developers of a lot of generation assets in the state. But they are also the companies, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Metas that actually cause a lot of generation to be constructed in the state of Kansas. So all of those companies, well, I guess with the exception of Apple, Apple doesn't have an asset right now in Kansas, but the rest do have operating assets or power purchase agreements for assets in Kansas. And the APA is supportive of the bill. We are silent on the incentives element of the bill. But the reason why I stand here before you today is because there has been a lot of discussion about the power needs of data centers and wanting to make sure that Kansas ratepayers aren't unduly being burdened with all of the costs associated with bringing on new data centers. And to be sure, the data center economy is absolutely happening. There is definitely even without the change in administration at the federal level, data center economy was already occurring. But certainly there is a clear directive now from Washington, D.C. that the nation is going to bolster its national security at all levels, drive true energy independence, restore manufacturing, and win the AI race. And there is really only one linchpin to that, and that is data centers and making sure that those data centers are housed here locally in the United States. That has led to the announcement of the Stargate Initiative, which was a $100 billion announcement up to $500 billion over the next couple years. And I mean, those are frankly staggering numbers to kind of get your head around, but those are very real numbers. You also saw last week Apple's announcement for another $500 billion in data centers in the United States. And Meta has said just this year alone, they're going to be investing $65 billion in data centers. So there are about 30 other states that do have this specific incentive in their toolbox to attract these companies. And Kansas is not one of them. But we absolutely have the resource to bring this type of economic development to the state. So we have a lot of existing generation facilities, whether it's wind, solar, battery storage, soon hopefully battery storage, and our existing generation units that can help power the data centers again, so we're not having to build a whole bunch of new generation in order to meet the need. Representative Sanders had a question about what data centers look like, and I'm not going to use a prop, but what I will tell you that I'll do.
That's not illegal in committee.
Well,
you can do whatever you want.
There is a great Kansas City Business Journal article that ran about a month ago, and it actually does feature what the 880-acre data center looks like in the Northland in Kansas City. I'll send that to you and to the committee just so you have an idea of what it looks like. So the 880-acre facility first was named Project Velvet, and that was for Meta's data center, $888 million data center. And then just to the southeast of that data center is Project Shale, which is Google's $1 billion data center. And those data centers Evergy is working with them, but they're also going to be powered by some additional generation that will be paid for entirely by the data center itself. So I want to pause there for a minute, because we do have a strong focus on making sure that Kansas ratepayers are not unduly burdened with economic development, new opportunities, and that industry is paying their fair share. And in this case, the developers pay. They pay for the new generation, they pay for any new system upgrades, and they pay for the transmission. The key to market for these developers is access to power. It's not the price. It's access to power and their speed to market, so how quickly they can bring their assets to bear. And so we have a huge project pipeline in the state of Kansas that already exists for new generation, and that is one area where we can ramp up very quickly and make sure that we can bring those data centers online in a much more expeditious manner than in perhaps other states, because our member companies already have such a strong development pipeline in Kansas. We actually just a couple weeks ago in Texas announced what's called a 1 gigawatt project. So for perspective, and that's about 1/11 of the peak load of demand in the state of Kansas. So one data center project is the equivalent of 1/11 of our peak load. That's pretty astounding, and one of our developers did all the behind-the-meter generation in order to make sure that that happened at the cost of the data center, not at the cost of the ratepayer. So I'm here, again, just in summary, supporting Senate Bill 51 because of the investment opportunity. These are not huge job creators, but they're also wonderful in our rural facilities where they do not essentially demand a lot of infrastructure. They are not a burden on the existing infrastructure either. They just do create new jobs and bring significant new investment to the state of Kansas. So with that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions on the power supply side of things. So thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. The last proponent I show appearing before the committee would be Mitch Robinson. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Today I'm here, I've got two hats on. You don't see them, but I am wearing two hats. The main hat is with the Kansas Economic Development Alliance. I'm current president of that group. We're represent about 76 communities across the state, over 100 members, economic development professionals that work in our communities to help create new jobs, bring new investment to their communities as well as the entire state. So this is Senate Bill 51 is something that we're very interested in. We've been involved in this, supporting it over the last couple attempts to bring a bill forward. I'm just going to focus on a couple things. And in my full-time job is I'm the Economic Development Director in Salina, Kansas. So the representative here is one of my guys that I work with. And then Representative Wolf is our newest representative for our northern part of Salina. So I'm glad to see both of them here. I'm going to focus on three things very quickly. The previous speakers have all done an excellent job talking about it. But first off is economic development and job creation. It's going to be a long-term aspect, but as been pointed out, we have a short window to take advantage of that. Recently, just released is a study by Perkins Cole. They're looking at U.S. data center market is poised for growth, and over the next 5 years, they're looking at $1 trillion of investment. So we've heard already about some of these major projects. So it's kind of easy to see how we could get to $1 trillion relatively quickly with the size of these investments. So, and this is being driven by expansion, as commented already, on AI, also online gaming, online retail, and cybersecurity are all part of what's driving this movement in the digital technological advancements we're seeing. Second item I want to talk about is that technological advancement. These data centers are really the backbone of today's technology. That's also been talked about, so I won't beat that horse to death. And then the third thing is the support for economic job creation in the local community. The tax revenues that's been mentioned, the infrastructure development that does come with the backbone that has to be installed, and then the creation of the auxiliary and ancillary services that would be provided to these data centers. So those are just three quick reasons I wanted to hit on and kind of follow up. And we always, you probably, like I am, sometimes get tired about hearing about the toolbox, or what's the tool belt? What do we have to do to bring projects to our state, our communities? We have used tax abatement in a lot of different projects over the last 8 to 10 years. If you want to be in the game, you have to have a toolbox. You have to have a tool. You have to have a bat, whatever analogy we want to use. We have to have that. And as been pointed out, we've got a limited window. If we're going to be in the game, we need this program. So please support Senate Bill 51. And I'll answer any questions either.
All right, that's all that I showed appearing before the committee. Is there anyone else who wanted to appear as a proponent? Seeing none, we'll now move to questions. Committee, Representative Clayton.
Thank you. My question is for Mr. Smoot. Thank you. So Brad, earlier you mentioned several different iterations of data center bills. Do you have those bill numbers handy? Because frankly, I would like to look up my own voting record. So if you don't have those right offhand now, I would be grateful if you could email those either to the chair or staff or someone, just so we can keep track of that.
545 was the Senate bill from last year. The House bill, I don't recall. That was 2 years ago. That's a long time for me. So, but I'll see to it.
Thank you.
Representative Corbett.
This will be for anyone. I had a constituent email or contact me. They lived down in Coffee County, and they were going to put a chip factory down there, and they got caught with a water problem. And I'm just concerned: is water going to be a big deal to these data centers?
That's a good question.
Mr. Chairman, we have some engineers in the room that can more articulately speak to that, but my understanding is that the use of water as a cooling is a rapidly changing industry, and the science of it's getting better and better for exactly the reason that we need that. The recycling of it, the recirculation of it, and so forth. So the industry is doing everything it can to make itself more efficient when it comes to cooling. These servers generate a lot of heat and have to be cooled. So you either have to pay for a lot of electricity to chill them, or you got to run water through the whole system to keep it chilled down. Again, somebody from Black and Veatch could respond better, but that's my understanding.
I wish we'd have got this passed 3 years ago. We lost a lot of good business.
Representative Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just in communicating, I'm not sure who to address this to, but in communicating with my economic development director and other people, one of the issues that comes up when we have industry like this that is interested is it's a great industry, but there's a huge electrical need. And in small communities or communities, we get in western Kansas, where we don't have that big electric grid, and the comment that I received from my economic development director is we just don't have the electric grid to handle some of those kind of industries. So how can we be sure enough that we'll get the electricity there? We've got land, we've got all kinds, we got water, but the grid is tough.
Representative Butler, thank you for your questions. Very thoughtful, and this is why I was here. So, yes, you're correct. In more of the, in some of our smaller communities, please know that many of them do see this data centers as very much progress and an investment that they would like to see in their area. So we have Kansas's, whether you're part of Kansas Municipal Energy Agency or Kansas KPP Energy on the municipal side, or Rural Electric Co-op or Evergy, they are absolutely experts in power procurement. And then they also, work with a lot of different developers, many of whom are members of the Advanced Power Alliance or other different independent power developers, in order to make sure that generation is on site and available. So once a location has been kind of looked at, actually typically what happens is they'll look at multiple different sites in an area and see who can bring on power supply in the most expeditious manner. Again, it's not necessarily price, it's much more time to market. So all of those different types of utilities operating in the state have the ability to try and procure the power in a timely manner and meet the needs of those data centers.
Thank you. I know one of the concerns when I asked if there's been any requests for proposals or anything that's come in, and one of the things that when those come in is what kind of energy do you have? How can you supply that? And if we don't have that grid there, then we can't go back and say this is a request for proposals. So I guess that's my concern.
No, and that is correct. So so all of the infrastructure, whether it's portions of the distribution center or system, or upgrades to the transmission system or to the generation itself, if the developer is going to cause any of those upgrades or new builds, then those are identified, and then the data center will pay for that. So they work hand in glove with local economic development, with the local utility, and to make sure that all of the infrastructure that's needed, whether it's power supply or roads or water, comes together, in a seamless manner. So.
Representative Helgerson.
And it can be Brad or anyone. I have two questions. First, why Kansas? If we have it, if it's available all around us, is there something specific that Kansas is going to provide, such as location, to some of the businesses that you want to tap into? Or why not just go to Missouri right now, because it's available, the tax exemption is there, or much better, Texas, because they're booming. That's the first question.
Great question. I'll try to be brief. I think that's the answer if we don't do anything. They will go there because it's already in place. But there is a huge pent-up need for data centers, and the availability of land and resources, and we have an aircraft industry here. Somebody may want to be close to that. We have the KU Med Center in Kansas City. Somebody may want to be close to that. There are lots of different things that Kansas already has that maybe would make a data center a very viable option, more so than one of those other states. But we don't, as you pointed out, we don't get in the game till we pass something like this that makes us at least equal on the tax footing to other states.
Can I go on? Brad, I love you, but that's not enough. Missouri's right across it's a few blocks away. Is this being promoted by individuals that'll take advantage of the building, and that's why we're looking at it specifically, or by Apple or somebody else? And I haven't seen Apple here. So they'd be able to save the money, so they'd want to develop here if there was some specific reason in Apple.
I think the availability of affordable real estate is a key factor.
You
The
think that's it?
availability of adequate power will be a key factor in all of this. Those are elements in addition to the other couple of things that I mentioned. And again, it's almost an endless need. We need to look at all the places that are viable. And when states compete with each other, maybe you get better deals for the businesses that are looking. That seems to be how it works.
Okay, the second question, I appreciate that. I still have a little, we'll go in depth in a little bit more later time. Okay. You said it's almost an infinite need. Well, you're also talking about, everything I've read says the water is going to be an infinite need for these developments. And we're talking about, in fact, heard the presentation today about needing $100 million or $200 million or $300 million spent by the state in order to have some water just to take care of our present needs. And that doesn't take care of really new businesses. I think I've gotten a few calls recently from people saying, we don't want this business because the business, if we put it on the balance, it's going to take away or it's going to drive up my water costs, and the water costs are going to get distributed to everybody. You want to comment on this a little bit, or?
Well, I think the technology may take care of itself in that regard. If there is a large availability of water, then water won't be an issue. If there isn't, they'll have to come up with alternatives or look elsewhere. We think we have locations in Kansas that we know developers are interested in. We know that Apple and several of our members are interested in the middle of America states. I mean, like I said, Nebraska, Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas, Ohio, on and on up through the Midwest are all doing this because they know there's a chance they may get one of these or two of these or even more. And to the extent that they do, their state benefits from that capital investment and all the things that go along with it. we just want to be in the game and have a chance here in Kansas to draw some of that interest. And we don't have that unless we pass Senate Bill 51.
Representative Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this question is for Kimberly, if she'll come back up. Thank you. My question is back on the energy piece of it. Outside of the strain on the grid, I think I heard one of our conferees say they think this will lower the cost of energy. My research says that it will do the opposite. With the increased strain, it might add, make our energy rates higher for not just consumers in general, business and residential. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think you're asking the right questions. It's incumbent upon you as policymakers to make sure that the policies that you're considering, that they don't have undue burdens or unintended consequences. And so a couple of things, again, going back to the data center developer, they will pay for the upgrades to this system. So whether it's, again, the distribution system upgrades or the transmission system or the new generation that needs to be built, the data center developer pays. So that is not a burden that is put on us, the ratepayer. And that is very important. There honestly are very few industries that have that financial capability to absorb all of those costs. Secondarily, I will say the Kansas Legislature, I guess in 2021, commissioned a study of how to lower Kansas electric rates. And one of the key facets of that study was to bring in new industrial load. And data centers are honestly the most stable of that industrial load. So when you have a new industry or a new company that's coming in that needs power all of the time, that is the best type of load that we can possibly have, because you're running all of the time and there's not a lot of volatility. We're just providing the power, constant steady stream, and that helps lower the cost overall to our consumers. So again, having that additional industrial development is very helpful to keeping power prices down or at least levelized. Because honestly, I mean, given the situation, the economic situation that we're in, I don't know that anyone can believe that we're actually going to see any price for anything come down, but you want to maintain it, you want to keep it level. And so in this sense, having access to the additional industrial load, coupled with knowing that the data center pays, helps ensure that Kansas ratepayers are not being burdened by the cost.
Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Kimberly, you might want to stay up there, or we might want to make Laura pay attention and come answer this.
Yes, I'll gladly phone a friend.
So I've heard anecdotally, I'm not familiar with this deal, but that a lot of these new larger data centers are self-generating their own utility. Is there any truth to that?
Yes, so that is one of the attributes with data centers, is there is what we call behind the meter generation. And so, they will come in and either they will have, on-site solar and storage, have a power purchase agreement for wind generation that's off-site or solar that's off-site. And I believe the two facilities in the Northland in Kansas City are going to largely be powered via Evergy through what we call a sleeve from solar facilities. But they do absolutely have the capability of doing on-site generation, which never touches the grid. Ratepayers are never exposed to any of the costs as a result. So it's definitely something that is happening, and it's something that APA members are doing. It's not a violation of the state's Retail Electric Suppliers Act, because none of the power is actually going on the grid. It's just literally behind the meter.
But in that case, on that electricity, there wouldn't be any sales tax collected on the sale of that electricity. Is that correct?
That's a very good question, and we don't have any of that happening at this time in Kansas yet, so I think it's a little bit remains to be seen, but that is potentially the scenario.
And can I ask a few other questions? And this might be for Brad, or it might be for Mr. Harden if he's on there. But when when one of these comes in, I assume that most of these developments use industrial revenue bonds so that they get a 10-year property tax abasement, or is that kind of like most of my assumptions and it's making something out of me?
I don't know the answer to that. I think Mr. Harden might, or Bob might know the answer to that as a developer, how those other mechanisms work. I would like to respond
Mr. Harden
to the
on,
energy question.
or maybe Mr. Johnson. I mean,
Yeah, they're typically done with industrial revenue bonds. That's correct. Revenue bonds. Basically, if the money isn't spent, then there's nothing to abate.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand a word of that, but I've got bad hearing.
I'm sorry, I might not be coming through, but
Yeah,
they're
we can hear
typically
you.
done.
Just repeat your statement.
Gotcha. Yeah, they're typically done with revenue bonds. That's correct. So if the money, if the money doesn't come in, there's nothing to abate.
So when we talk about how these local communities are able to expand their schools and raise their wages, if we're exempting the sales tax, if we're exempting the property tax, how do they ever realize the ability to make all of these great things happen in their community?
Yeah, let me jump in here. I appreciate the question. This is really my day-to-day bailiwick is representing developers, oftentimes proposing incentives, to the local level, and that certainly may occur here. Those proposals are made, but it is a case-by-case decision by the local jurisdiction whether they choose to approve those or not. They could choose to say, no, we want you in our community, we'll approve the land use, but we absolutely will not consider any industrial revenue bonds or property tax exemption for this project. I want to kind of circle back to my testimony, which is that this bill before us is narrowly tailored. It is only that sales tax exemption. So if DeSoto, Kansas, or any other community decides that they don't want to approve a sales or a property tax exemption, that is at their prerogative. So they can choose whether to exempt those taxes for the school district, for themselves, for the county, et cetera.
I'm not arguing that a bit, but there was testimony earlier that said that because we got one of these things, we increased the salaries of the teachers, certain percentage, we were able to do things with our roads and our streets. And I don't know, I was in local government for a lot of years, and one of the things that always got me was, if my county doesn't give you the 10-year property tax exemption, the next county one over will do the property tax exemption, and, we're back to square one. But so how was that testimony about the improvements in the Kansas City metro area for that one? How was that accomplished?
Sure. Yeah, I can't speak to that testimony. It wasn't mine, but I'll speak to the Panasonic project. I would be one who would say that I think that was a huge victory for the state, and I hope we all see at least some upsides to it. I know there's a span of opinions on the project, but I would say that DeSoto is a good example. They've lowered their property tax millage by a third after that project, largely because of all of the spillover benefits associated with that project. And that project has tax increment financing associated with it. Much like the data centers here, there will be spanned development beyond the data center. There will be large construction benefits over 2, 3, 4 years. These are large facilities, so they'll take multiple years to build, and we'll have over 1,000 jobs to build them. But beyond that, it's not just the upfront. It's, as I spoke to, and we're seeing this at our development in DeSoto, they will bring additional development that wants to co-locate around them. And so there's going to be substantial property tax, income tax, additional sales tax, ancillary benefits to these data centers. They're not standalone silos. And even if they got a property tax exemption themselves, which again, as you recognize, is a discretionary decision of the local body, even in that scenario, which can be approved for less than 100% as well, it may be something less than 100% of their property taxes, so there's an instantaneous hit from the data center. There's absolutely going to be connectivity, so to speak, with that brain that will bring additional development, that will bring sales tax, property tax, income tax dollars to the state and local jurisdictions.
And I don't know if you're the person to address this to or not, but I think it was Brad that made the comment that he felt like the 20 employees that would be generated for a $250 million project was more apt to be did I hear 100? And Brad, maybe you want to address that. Or maybe I misheard.
Yeah, Brad Smoot on behalf of NetChoice. Our numbers are that somewhere between 100 and 200 is the average for the data centers. And of course, the data centers vary in size. The one that we talked about in Missouri is 800 million, so it'll be larger. The 20 number is just the lowest number that everyone could agree on as a basis for starting. It's not really, I wouldn't look at it as the average or if that's all you're going to get kind of thing. I think you'll get a lot more as ongoing jobs, not to mention the thousands you get during construction and repairs and all of that.
So what would be some realistic, let's say some crazy legislator from Southwest Kansas that's never going to get one of these things wanted to put a more realistic number in there so that when he went home to talk to his constituents, better justification. What would be some more realistic numbers for the 250, the 500, and the billion? Or could you get those to me?
I could certainly try. I think, again, it depends on the size and the type of operation that it is. The construction jobs are going to be the big ticket up front, and that's where the big part of the exemption is for that share of it. But happy to get you a lot more information on that because we actually have quite a bit of that data available from states like Virginia and Nebraska and Iowa now that they're close by. We can compare apples to apples.
Right, and one of the things about those construction jobs, I mean, they're great, they're wonderful. I love the construction industry, but they're gone once the facility is done. And I do understand there will be some other jobs that come in as far as maintenance of the AC and stuff like that. Can I ask one more question?
We need to wrap up because we've only got 5 minutes left.
All right.
So, committee, I appreciate all of the discussion and the questions. This is a good bill to have some discussion on, but we've spent almost an hour and a half on the proponents. We still have an opponent testimony and we have another hearing. So I'm going to go ahead and move along. We do have an opponent, Zach Pastora.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Zach Pastora. I'll try to keep my remarks succinct. So appreciate the opportunity to be before you. I'm the, used to say proud lobbyist for the Kansas Sierra Club, still doing the lobbying, but I'm actually its new Kansas director, our first time employee for the Kansas chapter of Sierra Club. For those that don't know, we have nearly 5,000 members across our great state and many thousands of supporters that take action with us. We care about the environment, and we're here today. Unusual to be in front of the tax committee and the tax incentive on data centers, but we are concerned about the implications of this bill on our energy and water resources. So that's why we're here today. Let me just be clear, we're not opposed to data. All right, we use a lot of data in science to make our points, to advocate for why we should protect the environment. We're not inherently opposed to tax incentives either. So for what that's worth, what we are concerned about is the adverse impacts of data centers, if not done right, to already, in our view, limited energy supplies right now available for the grid and water supplies. And I'll just say that you know, I think there's real promise of data, artificial intelligence. I'm hoping it's those systems that can help us be smarter about our energy and water use in the future. But what I warn you about is just look at to some of the states that have had data center projects in their state and see what has happened as far as their increased demand electricity and therefore the ripple effects on electricity rates, but also the demand for water in those areas too. And I'll try to do my best to spell those out as succinctly as possible. And I'll just say that I think there are real benefits here as far as the economic development and jobs, but we know life isn't just about dollar signs, right? There's a quality of life here, and we count on our environment every day for clean air, clean water, for recreation, enjoyment, for sanctuary, et cetera. So let's not, you know, it's kind of like, well, data centers and jobs, economic development, but what at overall cost? And so I know you have to weigh some of that in your calculations of these policy debates. I'll offer you my testimony. A lot of good information in my view. I got the little green tree in the corner. Just look at it. And there's some slides here from Evergy, our largest public utility for electricity, to show where they have data centers in their economic development pipeline in their jurisdiction, as well as the planned increase of and how large those data centers are as far as the demand for electricity. Don't take my word for it, take theirs. They're expected to double their power generation needs in a short amount of time. I mean, I have here, you know, we're about 11 gigawatts on Evergy's peak power demand in their customer pipeline, about 11 gigawatts. So how are we gonna grow smart? If we are gonna grow and allow data centers in, how are we gonna grow smart? How can we maximize our opportunity to take those investment dollars in our communities and multiply them by utilizing our homegrown Kansas energy resources, right? And so I just want you to be aware of some of those things. I want to go to some of those other states. Virginia, one of the states with the largest amount of data centers. Dominion Energy predicts more of a 100% increase in electricity. That doesn't sound unfamiliar in the next 15 years, which could nearly double Virginian electric bills. So just think about that. In Georgia, they were home of 50 data centers. They passed a bill last year, and they're actually debating it because it got vetoed, a bill to remove the tax incentive for these data centers, okay? So that's a state that passed it, and then they're having buyer's remorse. So I just want to say that we could be doing this right, and I think we could be doing it in a way that offers us a competitive advantage. If we can say, hey, our energy is going to come from homegrown Kansas local resources that don't use water, that use the sun, the wind, energy storage, energy efficiency techniques, then maybe we can change the ball game here. But right now, it doesn't look good in terms of energy resources. Same with water. I'm looking at Google's data center in Iowa, 980 million gallons of water per year. In Oklahoma, 815 million gallons of water per year. Yeah, 300 to 3 million gallons of water per day, okay? Could we use gray water? Could we maybe pay the corn farmer for their water right to power a data center? Maybe we can transfer our water usage to not make a net increase of water demand in a state that already faces diminishing water resources. I include here in my testimony some safeguards, some recommendations from our standpoint on how we could do this the Kansas way, in my view, do it right by our environmental resources in our communities. But as of now, we'll just say that without environmental assurances and other safeguards, this looks to be a taxpayer handout to some of the most profitable businesses that we Kansans, ratepayers, and our environment cannot afford. So with that, I just urge you to think about what we're getting into by putting out the welcome mat for these data centers. And just one thing I should say, I don't know, I'll believe it when I see it, when these data centers are gonna pay for our electrical power generation. Okay, I was just at a KCC hearing last night for Evergy's proposed 2 separate billion-dollar gas plants, raise rates on electric customers 4%. Okay, they have a current rate case going on right now where they want to increase bills 10% on the average electric bill. That's to maintain our current coal plants. And so we're seeing data centers extend the life of our coal plants. We're paying Wyoming for their coal resource. We build these gas plants, I guarantee we're going to be paying Oklahoma, Texas, and other states for their gas resources, 4 power plants in the next 7 years if we go with Evergy's plan. When we could open up, some of these other states have policy mechanisms to allow for more on-site clean energy supply for their power. So I just think if we do this, let's be smart about it and pair it with some other policy mechanisms to help our state protect the environment as well. Thank you.
Very good. Do not show any other opponents. Is there anyone else wishing to appear as an opponent? Might stay up here. There might, just in case there's a few questions, Zach. Seeing none, I have Representative Clayton and then Corbett for question.
Zach, thank you for being here today. So I'm a solutions-oriented kind of person. I really feel supportive of this bill because of the jobs that it creates in the building and trades community in particular. Is there any language that you might be able to come up with where you could work behind the scenes with the stakeholders to try and find something where we can manage to get something like this taken care of in a way that Sierra Club will be comfortable?
I think so. I think so.
Okay, I would be totally down for you guys to just, you know, kind of have a visit and see some ways that you can come together, because I don't see this as an impossible thing for us to manage. So I just want to let you know that I definitely care about your issue and the environment, but you know, also in the dual factor of caring about economic development and jobs. But I think hopefully I would love to see the stakeholders come together and come up with something.
Representative Corbett?
The question I have for you, and you come up a lot on every time we're trying to expand something in Kansas. I mean, how's Kansas going to grow if it's no to everything? I mean, it's kind of America. You got to figure things out. It's almost like this state's got signs on all sides of it, closed for business. And we need to get some business in the state and grow the state, but you just can't keep saying no. There's got to be a solution here, but I think there's a chance to get some business in here.
Yep, I appreciate Representative, and I agree. I hope I made the point come across that I think we can grow, but maybe grow smart. Okay, not at the expense of taxpayers or other residents paying on the cost somewhere else. So I think, yeah, we can grow smart if we do it right. And again, I think if we do it, we'll have a competitive advantage to say, hey, Google, Meta, Apple, do your business in Kansas where it's your dollar's gonna go have a multiplier effect locally, and your company's gonna look better because we can power it with clean energy solutions that don't pollute the air.
Representative Butler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So talking about water, so I'm thinking this may be for you. And you're looking at, you made a comment here, 3 million gallons a day, I think is what it was. Yep. Yeah, I live in a community that has the largest lake in the state of Kansas, right outside of the largest military installation in the state of Kansas. A lot of good things going on, rivers. You know, the two rivers meet, make Kansas River. So we got a lot of water. But what happens to the water that's used? So if you're using 3 million gallons a day, what's the process for that? Do you understand? I mean, do you know the process for it? What happens to it when it's used? Does it go back into the system? Is it reprocessed? So.
Thank you, Representative. And yeah, you do live in a beautiful area, so we don't want to protect those water resources. My understanding, and I believe it was right, as was said earlier, the water use is used for cooling for these buildings and the equipment, et cetera. There's been increased need and emphasis to do the best part is water conservation, water efficiency. I think we're seeing a more trend for water recycling. So any water that comes in, we can use it, but then we also make sure we try to give it back to the ecosystems and the resources, and even potentially clean it, make it better along the way. We got to be really smart about that, make sure that the industry is being held accountable to those points, and that you know, we're all being honest players in all this. So for what that's worth, gray water recycling, again, we could do some things to where maybe we do have a irrigator that's looking to retire, but I'm holding on to this water right. What can we do to maybe transfer that data center for the business, still pay the landowner, et cetera. So I think there's ways we can do this, and I truly believe the industry is trying to continue to do better by these natural resources, but inherently, it takes a lot of water, and we're a state that's really concerned about our water resources. This is an important conversation to have.
Any further questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Do we have any neutral appearing before the committee? We do have one written only neutral testimony. Is there anyone wishing to appear neutral? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 51, and we'll turn our attention to Senate Bill 117. And I will turn to the reviser for an overview, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 117 would expand and clarify the property exemption for the Strother Field Airport. Under current law, there is a current exemption for Strother Field Airport. However, this bill would expand this exemption to include property owned by the political subdivisions that comprise the Strother Field Airport and depicted on the airport's federally approved airport layout plan, whether used for aviation-related purposes, to promote aviation commerce, or to provide revenue to operate the airport. Essentially, the bill clarifies that property of the Strother Field Airport will be exempt from ad valorem property tax. With that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Committee, are there any questions? Adam, is this identical? I know we've had this bill before the committee before we've held a hearing. And maybe I can ask the proponents, is there anything that's changed that you're aware of?
The initial part, no. There was a part on the very end that has to do with penalties and interest accrued where the date had been updated. The current law states going back to 1992, and I believe when I looked in prior versions that had been updated, and for some reason that was not updated in this bill. I don't know the reason why.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further questions, we will move on to the I apologize, I didn't read the fiscal note. If there's any fiscal impact here. Kathleen, do you want to speak just briefly to the fiscal note? It'd just be on the statewide levies.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. This bill would decrease the property tax revenues by expanding a current property tax exemption. The state funds that would be directly affected by this bill would be the two building funds, the Educational Building Fund and the State Institutions Building Fund. We're estimating that the bill would decrease revenues to these two funds by approximately $3,500 in fiscal year 25. And to the extent that less property tax revenue would be available from the state's uniform mill levy to fund the expenditures for the school districts, the state would be required to provide an additional $46,000 in state aid from the state general fund.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. Any questions, committee? Seeing none, we will move on to the proponents and welcome first to committee, Mr. Mike Taylor.
Oh, thank you very much. I know it's been a long day, so I'll make this very quick. It's really a very simple bill. It's about two things. It's about economic development, and it's about not having to apply property taxes to the residents of Ark City and Winfield. So the Strother Field Industrial Park Airport is a $2.1 billion economic impact on South Central Kansas. There's 1,700 jobs hosted there, and it's got a payroll of about $190 million. It has always been, because of its history as a federal air base turned over to the cities of Kansas City and Winfield, it's always been intended to be tax exempt, and that was written into legislation. But in recent years, that somewhere got lost in the shuffle. So what's happened is Strother Field has had to go to BOTA to appeal some of these cases. They've won 4 out of the 5 cases, and that 5th case is on appeal, because BOTA realizes, yeah, all of this property should be tax exempt. It was originally intended to be tax exempt. So what we're trying to do is clarify that and get the statute back to where it had always been since the 1990s. The one reason for this is because they keep winning going to BOTA, but it's cost them over $500,000 to fight these cases. And so that's money that would be used to support the airport, make it self-supporting, which it is. But if they have to keep fighting these battles, $500,000, $600,000, that's money that's taken away from supporting the airport. And eventually, the fear is that Ark City and Winfield will have to say, hey, we're going to have to, for the first time ever, impose a property tax levy on our citizens to pay for the airport. So we're trying to prevent that by simply clarifying this piece of the law that had always been there anyway. So that's the long and short of it. And I will say it did pass the Senate 39-1.
Thank you, Mike. And I know when we've had this hearing before, I think that last point that you made is the point that I hadn't understood clearly before. And now I understand the scope and how that all works better. So thank you for that. Our next proponent would be Taggart Vall.
Mr.
Welcome to
Chairman, committee members, sorry, we're a little out of order, so I'll just.
Okay, no problem.
I was going to summarize, but you guys can figure it out.
Hey, if you guys want to flip around, if you had a planned order, that is fine with me.
I think we'll be all right. That's
okay.
Thank you. We'll get you out of here. I also own, so to speak, as the city manager of Winfield, a municipal electric utility. So while I, enjoyed sitting through that, I'm happy to move on to this item. Just as a summary, and I don't want to repeat everything, so we're going to try and hit different points here. Strother Field Airport is just by its very nature unique, going back to World War II. That's how this whole thing got started. It's the only airport in the state not supported by a mill levy. It's unique in its founding, back to World War II, and in its operation. Strother Field Airport is 50% of the economic impact of all Kansas general aviation airports and 20% of all airports beyond just general aviation. The legislature recognized that in 1991 by setting it out uniquely in statute. There's Q, R, and S. I'm getting in the weeds here a little bit. And if we were intended to be in Q or S, there wouldn't be an R. But there is an R, and that's what we're trying to clarify. I like that the reviser used the word clarify when they first started talking, because that's all we're trying to do here, is clarify the statute and get it back to where it was. We've got to find a way to keep this airport self-supporting so that we don't have to tax with property tax the citizens of Winfield and the citizens of Arc City.
Thank you. Our next and final conferee would be Randy Frazier.
Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. So I'm Randy Frazier, City Manager of Arkansas City. So like you've heard from the previous two proponents, Strother Field is a critical economic driver in South Central Kansas and Cowley County. And it operates without a single dollar of local property tax. And it relies entirely on business rent to sustain itself. Strother Field is owned by Arc City and Winfield. And the two cities take on the financial responsibility of that since Strother Field isn't a taxing entity. So if this bill isn't corrected, the property taxes that would be collected would go to the county, not to the cities. And that could put a burden on our city and citizens for having a property tax to support any shortfalls in revenue. And then it would cause issues with us being able to support our own cities, our own fire departments, our police departments, and keeping the infrastructure improvements up that we need to within our cities. So passing this bill will prevent unnecessary financial strain on Arkansas City and Winfield. It protects our residents from new tax burdens and ensures that Strother Field remains an asset, not a liability for our communities. So thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Gentlemen, committee questions. Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know the hour is late. I'll keep this real short. So how did this get goofed up in the first place?
Your guess is as good as mine. I mean, it's written in statute, and we keep having to go back to BOTA, and BOTA keeps agreeing with us. We keep spending money to get BOTA to agree with us. All we're trying to do is maybe make it as clear as it can be that this is the intent of the statute. So how we keep getting to this, I don't have a great answer for that, Representative.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee, any further questions? Seeing none, Thank you, gentlemen, again for your testimony. I do not show any opposition or neutral testimony on Senate Bill 117. Was there anyone else wishing to appear before the committee? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 117. Committee, thank you for your patience. We are adjourned.